we have spent the last year and a half talking about the first four lines. And just in case you forgot, here are the first four lines. You train yourself. Breathing in, you know that you are breathing in. You train yourself. Breathing out, you know that you are breathing out. You train yourself. Breathing in, steadying any mental or bodily formation that arises. You train yourself. Breathing out, steadying any mental or bodily formation that arises. You train yourself. Breathing in, calming any mental or bodily formation that arises. You train yourself. Breathing out, calming any mental or bodily formation that arises. You train yourself. Breathing in, releasing any mental or bodily formation that arises. You train yourself. Breathing out, releasing any mental or bodily formation that arises. So at this point, I am making up that every single one of us has this, like, really down in our practice. We can do this. We do this. We've been doing it for a long time. We're really good. And so it's time to take a step forward in this sutta and talk about lines 5 through 8, the second quatrain of the sutta. And the Anapanasati sutta, this sutta focused on the in and out of breathing, has this group of 16 lines to train yourself. And in these 16 lines, we're somewhat replicating the Satipatthana Sutta, which is the four foundations of mindfulness. So that first foundation, where we're primarily focused on knowing breathing in and watching the different formations that arise as we're paying attention to breathing in, is primarily focused on establishing the body, establishing an awareness of the experience of the body breathing, of the body having sensations of all kinds. And like the concept of the four foundations, the second group of four lines focuses on Vedana. I'm using the Pali word because there really isn't an English word that captures it. Um, Often the translation is something like feeling tone or feeling itself. But this feeling that is being described, this word Vedana describes that every time one of our senses make contact, every time there's a thought, a smell, a taste, a sight, a sound, a sensation in the body, anything that arises in our experience, co-arising with it is a sense of Vedana. And Vedana is simply broken down like this. Um, Whatever it is that you've made contact with, let's say a sound makes contact with hearing, right? When that occurs, the sound that is heard um, is either stimulating or it's not stimulating. If it's not stimulating, you simply ignore it. You move on, you pass over it, which might not be the wisest thing in the world because there might be something in that sound that has tremendous value. Um, but that is what we naturally do as a living organism. We have the ability to assess in some manner whether or not a sense contact is stimulating us, is interesting, is worthy of our attention. If it is worthy of our attention, there are two kinds of stimulating contacts. One is pleasant, the other is unpleasant. That's really important. Um, in some ways, um, that may be the most important thing in all of practice, is being able to discern in the moment as it occurs the arising of pleasant and unpleasant. When we can notice the arising and pleasant of pleasant or unpleasant, um, that gives us the opportunity to have some agency over what to do next. When we don't notice the arising of pleasant or unpleasant contact, then we immediately, habitually go to the next step, which is getting entangled with it. If it's pleasant, the entanglement focuses on how do I keep this around? How do I sustain this as part of my life? If it's unpleasant, the entanglement involves how do I get rid of this? How do I get distance from it? How do I make it not part of my life? There is the Buddha's path that was laid out in the very first teaching of the Buddha. And the path includes the intention to be free of the, the dictatorship of this pleasant and unpleasant response. Um, this wanting things, this not wanting things, rules our life for the most part. Not just us in this Zoom room, but of course all of humanity, but all of life is constantly being pushed and pulled by whether this is wanted or whether this is not wanted. You know, a good general term for that is preferences. And one of the nice things about preferences is it points to that there is some conditions, uh, um, mostly historic, that lead us to this is something I want, this is something I don't want. So, you know, the simplest example, you go out to lunch with a friend and you get menus at some restaurant and they're excited about ordering something that you think is disgusting. They want it, you don't want it. Um, so that's a very vivid example that whether something is wanted or not wanted is dependent. Um, you know, there could be somebody wandering the streets of Philadelphia looking for a fight for whatever reason. In fact, there probably is. And um, and what for that person would be pleasant, which is finding someone to fight with, would for me be extraordinarily unpleasant. I would not want that in any way. The range is really very broad, and where we might want to say, well, there are certain things that everyone agrees on, I don't know that that's so, you know. And I think it's more useful for us individually to, I'm distracted by a family of baby turkeys walking by the window. Sorry, they're very cute. Um, that's a turkey. Yeah, a baby turkey. Um, so the second factor of the Eightfold Path is called right intention. And one of the um, aspects of right intention is the intention to be free of the tyranny of wanting and not wanting, to be unbound, unshackled, unfettered, to be free. The freedom from wanting and not wanting leads to joy. That is the natural arising experience when you're completely free of wanting and not wanting, when you're basically resting in equanimity. And equanimity, just to be clear, doesn't mean everything's the same. It means that you are available to whatever arises. You're not pulling things toward you, you're not pushing things away. Whatever arises, each unique thing, you will deal with in whatever way you deem appropriate. Again, that freedom from wanting and not wanting creates agency, creates the ability to choose, to be the one determining the path. It's fabulous. So, the second quatrain, the second group of 4 lines in the Anapanasati Sutta addresses this. And it begins with, you train yourself. I will breathe in sensitive to joy. You train yourself. I will breathe out sensitive to joy. I like very much that that's the first of the 4. I like very much that what we need to do is become sensitive to moments when we feel the release of wanting and not wanting, and joy arises. It happens every day. Being sensitive to its presence, being mindful that this is a moment when wanting and not wanting have disappeared. This is a moment when whatever is arising in my experience is what it is. It's not there for my purpose. It's not me. It's there to be mindful of, to make a relationship with, to feel connected to open your heart to. And when your heart is open, joy arises. So you train yourself. I will breathe in sensitive to joy. You train yourself. I will breathe out sensitive to joy. So in the way that I'm choosing to teach this, I'm going to teach it this way. The first line refers to the experience of the absence of wanting and not wanting. The second line is related to happiness. Happiness is the experience of um, ease with the arising of wanting and not wanting. So it does arise, it's present, but you know it, you're mindful, and you're relaxed about it. You don't feel, you can feel like a sense of pull or push, but you're not going with it, you're not entangled with it. And that's how I'm defining the second line, which says, you train yourself. I will breathe in sensitive to happiness. You train yourself. I will breathe out sensitive to happiness. So we have here a word sensitive, which we didn't have in the first group. The first group was focused on knowing. The second group were sensitive. I love sensitive. I love people who are sensitive. I love people who think they're too sensitive when of course they're not too sensitive. It's the world that's like harsh and difficult. I love sensitive. And I'm going to sort of define sensitive um, as a subtle knowing. That in the first line, the knowing is, um, I don't know if I want to use the word gross, but that seems to be the opposite of subtle. It's just sort of an obvious, a thought arises. I know that a thought has arisen. It doesn't take, a subtle knowing. You can just know. I know a thought has arisen. I know turkeys ran across the lawn. You know, these are not subtle things. These are pretty strong. To note the absence or the presence of wanting, the absence or the presence of not wanting is more subtle. And so it's a more subtle knowing. So I really like the choice of the word sensitive. So you breathe in sensitive to joy. You breathe out sensitive to joy. The arising of joy arising in the absence of wanting and not wanting. You breathe in sensitive to happiness. You breathe out sensitive to happiness. The experience of ease as you note wanting or not wanting arising, and you choose not to get entangled, not to make it worse. It just is. Then you get to the much more common experience. You train yourself. I will breathe in sensitive to wanting. You train yourself. I will breathe out sensitive to wanting. You train yourself. I will breathe in sensitive to not wanting. You train yourself. I will breathe out sensitive to not wanting. So here we're saying that if you're going to pay attention to the arising of Vedana, of feeling tone, the key thing to watch for is the arising of wanting and not wanting. And at first I thought it's interesting that it's laid out in this order. You would think first you would present the wanting and not wanting, and then go to happiness as you're learning to be at ease with it, and then joy as you're learning to be absent. But I'm delighted it starts with joy. Um, because, in a sense, that frames the first four lines, the knowing, steadying, calming, and releasing, as the process of developing joy, of developing a disentanglement with whatever is arising in experience, a disenchantment with whatever arises in experience. Much of what arises in experience is seductive and enchanting. It's like, ooh, that's a thought I should pursue. Ooh, that sensation in the body. Let me stop everything and focus on that. You know, and we do that as part of practice. We do all those things. But the Anapanasati practice is the practice of um, basically renunciation, letting go, releasing, saying, not now, honey. It's not that I'm dismissing you. It's not that I don't love you or that I'm not interested in what you have to say. Right now, I'm resting in the knowing of what arises. I'm knowing the breath. I'm knowing the arising of sense experience. I'm steadying whatever arises and calming whatever arises and releasing any entanglement with what arises. Any sense of it being about me. The most difficult thing of all, releasing a sense that it's about me and letting it be itself. Very difficult. And when you do, joy arises. So we're starting off the second group already knowing we have attained some degree of knowing the experience of disentanglement. And that we have at moments, every day, moments of just pure joy when we are not caught in wanting and not wanting. Now, I say that I have had miserable days where I'm caught up in something and it feels like every moment of the day. And I suspect if I could do some kind of I don't know what, an investigation of every moment of that day, there will be moments when I forgot for the moment that I was miserable. And I was just busy with something or something else came up and interrupted my misery. And in that moment, you know, there might have been just a little flash of joy that I was like not interested in because I was wallowing in my misery, which we do. As probably we need to do on occasion. So you train yourself. I will breathe in sensitive to joy. I will breathe out sensitive to joy. And you watch what you have attained, the skill that you have built in being able to be in the presence of that pull toward what's wanted and that push away from what's not wanted. And in those moments, happiness can be present. Happiness that you are no longer bound, frozen in your stance of being pulled and pushed, but steady on your own feet, calm as you experience this push and pull, and releasing the need to go with the push, to go with the pull, and instead resting right here with this, whatever it is that's present, happy. And then you train yourself. I will breathe in sensitive to wanting. I will breathe out sensitive to wanting. Well, these moments of joy and happiness will unfortunately not be all day. May I be wrong, may it be so that it is. And and so it's really significant to be sensitive to when wanting is present, to be sensitive to when not wanting is present, and to know that this is the process. Every single time one of the senses become active, hearing or seeing, tasting or smelling, thinking or sensations in the body, anytime one of those senses become active, make contact with something to sense, there is a feeling of pleasant or unpleasant if you pay attention to it. If you choose not to pay attention to it, then it's neither pleasant nor unpleasant. You just move on. This, I would say, on long retreats is a wonderful, subtle thing to pay attention to bring your attention to some of the things that aren't stimulating at all. They're not pleasant or unpleasant. Maybe it's like, the wall to your left. It's just the wall. There's nothing there. But sometimes it's nice to glance at the wall to your left and say, thank you for holding up the ceiling. It exists. It's alive. It's present. All these things that we don't pay attention to because they don't stimulate wanting or not wanting. They're not stimulating us. So that's nice. But this part, this practice, is to watch the arising of wanting, to watch the arising of not wanting. Because that's going to happen most of the time. The ease with it will happen some of the time. The absence of it will happen some of the time. But the presence of one or the other will be very common. And we can note that. And what we're noting it is we're noting it by being sensitive, which is a very subtle knowing. Because our primary knowing is still knowing the mental and bodily formations that arise, which are not so subtle. An itch is not so subtle. A dog barking is not so subtle. A thought about what I need to do later today is not so subtle. But catching the feeling tone of each, the barking dog, pleasant or unpleasant? Do you want it to go away? Do you like that it's there? Maybe you feel safe with your neighbor's dog barking because you feel like it keeps people in the neighborhood. Maybe you hate it. Know this. Be sensitive as you're just noting, hearing, dog barking. Be sensitive to not wanting. Maybe a smell wanders into the room and it's really pleasant. So normally you're sitting there, you're watching your breath, you note smell, and be sensitive to that. And it's pleasant. Be sensitive to wanting. Ooh, whatever that is, I want it. I'm moving toward it. I'm leaning forward. It's pulling me. So that's what we're going to practice this morning. And maybe for the next year, if we follow the routine. We'll see.